Tune into NiceRadio every Saturday at 7:30 a.m. for A View from the Outside, hosted by Brereton Horne. A View from the Outside takes a look at key issues affecting St. Vincent and the Grenadines and gives a global perspective on how these issues are viewed. Host Brereton Horne will examine a variety of topics to enlighten, stimulate debate, and explore solutions. Hear the facts, hear the real-life stories, hear A View from the Outside. Join Brereton Horne at 7:30 a.m. every Saturday on NiceRadio for A View from the Outside.
This society needs a spectacle. It might help us.
All right, and we're standing by for Mr. Brereton Horne this week for his contribution on the Saturday morning's program. He was with us a short while, but he'll be back as we await his call. 4565967. Of course, he is calling all the way from England, and he'll be making his contribution in a short while, discussing some of the things that made news here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and also hinting at some other international stuff. As we say, pleasant good morning to Mr. Horne.
Good morning to you, Justin.
Good
How are
morning.
you?
Nice, great, and wonderful.
Yeah, it does appear we're having some technical difficulties this morning, but nothing that can't be ironed out, and so we are on. Yes,
definitely.
How are you?
Oh, I'm great.
How's the weather?
Well, just good. From the last time I remember coming to the studio.
I see.
I haven't had a look outside since I came in.
Yes.
And that was like 2 hours ago.
Okay, I was enjoying your music. You playing Mr. Big Stuff,
back from the 70s.
Yes, sir. Mr. Big Stuff. Who do you think you are, Justin, Mr. Big Stuff?
Well, we could ask a lot of people who they think they are.
Absolutely. I agree. Let me say good morning to all of the listeners of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, all of the people, that is, all of the listeners of NiceRadio, wherever you are. Good morning to you. It's a bright, sunny day in London, Justin.
Oh, great.
You said great, but let me continue. But it's cold.
Well, I mean, it's
bright, sunny.
Some bright and sunny is great for us. But even though in the summer it's slightly chilly.
Yes, and the temperature actually is 2 degrees Celsius, which is approximately 36 degrees Fahrenheit.
All right.
So it's a cold day, but it's a lovely, bright, sunny day. So those who like that kind of weather would be out and about.
I know. As usual, you pitch your stuff mainly for the local situation, but now I just saw something on Facebook here with the Brexit. Government says voters can change Brexit deal. I'm sure there's an issue for you guys up there in England, and Mr. Trump recognizing Jerusalem.
Yes, well, Justin, a lot seems to be happening around the world. As you say, Brexit, in my view, continues to stumble along.
Okay.
Despite the fact that we are told that a breakthrough, a great breakthrough has been made. But I continue to say, watch this space as far as Brexit is concerned.
All right.
And you're quite right. One of the persons who was at the forefront of the Brexit campaign, Michael Gove, people might remember that name. He wrote an article in the papers this morning, and he actually hinted that the people, the voters of this country, can reverse Brexit at some later stage. So,
all right.
So I say continue to watch this space.
Great.
And yes, as far as America is concerned, America is mired in all sorts of controversy. And as you have said, Jerusalem, that Mr. Trump has announced as the capital city of Israel, we have seen what that has triggered in that part of the world.
I don't want to extend too much, but I just want to give a word of caution to our local people, because I've heard a few discussions on radio and persons connecting, news in St. Vincent about Palestine, and they're quickly alluding it to terrorists and all of that. I would advise people, do some more reading. There are a lot of stuff out there. You go into YouTube and you'll find information that should be able to come up with a better judgment instead of just jumping to a conclusion.
Absolutely, and Justin, that's a very good point you're making, especially for those people who are in the media and who are influencing opinion. They ought to do the research. They ought to read. They ought to ensure that the research, that the information is authentic, and so that they can better inform the public. Very good point. And I hope that those who are concerned take heed.
Okay, so you go right ahead, man.
Yes. So on a view from, before we begin, I just want to credit someone who has contributed to today's program. He contributes to the program regularly, and he has contributed to some of the research on this program. Mr. Guvara Leacock, I credit him in part. And as well, I encourage others to continue to contribute as they have been doing. On a view from the outside this week being the 9th of December 2017, we focus on the issue of domestic violence against women in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, with the view being that Vincentians must strive to remove this scourge which is affecting women and girls in the country. On the 25th of November 2017, just under 2 weeks ago, the world observed the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, with the theme, quote, "Orange the world, leave no one behind, end violence against women and girls," unquote. The United Nations reports that violence against women and girls is one of the most widespread, persistent, and devastating human rights violations in our world today. In line with this, a view from the outside is indeed concerned that violence against women and girls is a widespread, persistent, and devastating human rights violation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is worth noting here that it is our view, on a view from the outside, that all forms of violence against any gender is wrong and must be avoided. However, our focus this week is on women and girls in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Violence against women and girls can take many forms, and it is important at this point to outline some of the forms it may take. Violence or abuse may manifest itself as physical, sexual, emotional, and economic. The perpetrators of this violence or abuse may include the state and or its agents, family members, including husbands and boyfriends, friends, intimate partners, or strangers. Women and girls can therefore be abused by several persons or agents, both known and unknown to them. Over the years, there have been many examples highlighted of violence and abuse being perpetrated against women in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Some of these include Michelle Andrews, who alleged that she was raped and sexually assaulted in the early hours of the morning by the Prime Minister at the Prime Minister's residence, whilst she carried out her duties as a police officer guarding him and his family. From the time of those allegations until now, she has been vilified and subjected to all forms of verbal and emotional abuse by members and agents of the ruling party. Vinette Frederick, a dynamic lawyer and political activist, was brutally arrested, and she too has been vilified and subjected to all forms of verbal and emotional abuse. Kate, a woman who dared to relate her experiences of how she was raped and suffered all forms of domestic violence, was stripped bare. Agents of the state allowed her immigration history and other sensitive information to be aired publicly. Kate continues to suffer verbal psychological, and emotional abuse. Throughout the year 2017, we have heard and read about many of the incidents of violence against women in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There are too many to mention, and so we will just highlight a few here. In January 2017, we heard of Nicola Chambers, a 53-year-old farmer of Rose Hall, who was violently attacked twice, once with a knife. In April, 32-year-old Shamil Boyens was gunned down in Otley Hall. In August, 44-year-old Monique Clark was set on fire and subsequently died. In September, 23-year-old Simona De Silva met her death to a violent attack in Fair Hall. In addition to those, there were several other reports throughout the year of domestic assaults and rape of women in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The issue of violence against women and girls in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a real and present one, and every effort must be made towards its reduction and eradication. In 2014, a report published by the International Clinic for the Defense of Human Rights from the University of Quebec in Montreal, Canada, and the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Human Rights Association painted a damning picture of abuse against women in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. One of the things highlighted by the report was that St. Vincent and the Grenadines does not provide adequate protection to women. This observation was based on the apparent inadequacy of the 1995 Domestic Violence Act, which provided very little recourse to the victim. Subsequent to that report, however, the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines passed a new Domestic Violence Act in 2015. This Domestic Violence Act, 2015, has been in force since November 2016. Yet we continue to see a rise in violence against women in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Legal practitioners, social workers, and others have all heavily criticized this new legislation as being inadequate and ineffective in assisting women who suffer abuse in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There are two main issues which have been identified with this new legislation. Firstly, the Act requires the consent of the applicant, the victim or the complainant, before any action can be taken against a perpetrator. It must be noted here that it is very often the case in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that women and girls who are abused do not complain at all, or when they do complain and proceedings are started, they withdraw the complaint or refuse to give evidence, which causes the case to be discontinued. Secondly, the Act also does not have a criminal component pertaining to the violent act perpetrated against the victim. It mainly provides for protection orders, such as a restraining order or a maintenance order. It is interesting to note that these are some of the very weaknesses that the 2014 report identified with the 1995 Domestic Violence Act. It would seem, therefore, that even with the new legislation, not much has changed to allow for greater protection of women and girls in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And it is therefore safe to conclude that adequate legislative reform is needed given the seemingly rising occurrences of violence against women and girls in the country. It is important to note here that legislation is not enough to bring about the much needed change. We, as Vincentians, therefore, must strive to change our attitudes towards committing acts of violence against women and girls in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We must train our children from a young age that such actions are wrong. The name-calling and public shaming and vilification must stop. There must be no room for names like Picky Head or Snotty Nose Girl. We must engage our teachers, nurses, priests, politicians, social activists, and others with social responsibility in our country on the causes and effect of this scourge called domestic violence. We must engage in campaigns to rid our country of this clear and present danger. It is never too early or too late to start the process of addressing this serious issue in our country. We must act swiftly to stamp it out. All Vincentians are therefore asked to call out domestic violence in all of its forms, including verbally or physically when it occurs. Those who are leaders in St. Vincent and the Grenadines must lead by example, and they must strive to avoid committing acts of violence against women and girls in the country. Recently, it has been widely reported that a Vincentian diplomat living and serving at the United Nations in the United States of America allegedly attacked and injured his wife, who is also reported to be a diplomat. Ironically, this incident is alleged to have taken place on the cusp of the United Nations observation of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence against Women and Girls. Several international and regional media organizations have reported on the matter. However, Vincentians are yet to have any firm and decisive action by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Therefore, the questions remain. Are the allegations true? Has the diplomat been recalled? Whilst it is reported that he is currently in St. Vincent, has he been relieved of the post of consular to the United Nations? If so, what action will now be taken against him? The current silence by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines on this matter is simply not good enough. As a nation, as a country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines cannot deal with this matter, this very serious matter, this very serious allegation in a light manner. Violence against women and girls is an extremely serious matter in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the government must take a firm and decisive stance against it. It is hope, and it is the hope of A View from the Outside, that the matter will be dealt with the seriousness it requires. And if true, it must be condemned. And a public statement of condemnation must be made by the government. Citizens of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as the world, must see that our country takes the issue of violence against women and girls seriously. The United Nations has encouraged 16 days of activism to end violence against women and girls. Was there an acknowledgement of this by St. Vincent and the Grenadines? If not, why not? In light of that encouragement by the United Nations, therefore, we, on A View from the Outside, encourage all Vincentians to extend this 16 days indefinitely until the scourge of domestic violence against women and girls in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is no more. And in the process of that extension, let us remember the words of Kofi Annan, a former Secretary General of the United Nations. He said, and I quote, "Violence against women is perhaps the most shameful human rights violation, and it is perhaps the most pervasive. It knows no boundaries of geography, culture, or wealth. As long as it continues, we cannot claim to be making real progress towards equality, development, and peace." Until next week, Justin and all of the listeners, this is Brereton Horne with a view from the outside, thanking all those who continue to send feedback and reminding you to continue to do so. Send your feedback to a view from the outside at hotmail.com. Justin, you have a very good Saturday, have a pleasant Sunday, and have a violence-free week ahead. All the best to you and everyone.
And thank you very much.